Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for June 6th, 2023. Let me begin by reminding you that today is the anniversary of D-Day, the day in 1944 when the U.S. launched an invasion into France across the English Channel which began the inevitable defeat of the Nazis. This used to be a day that was fairly prominently recognized in the United States, and to all the veterans who were involved in that, to all the Americans who were supporters of that, most of whom have passed away, we owe a debt of gratitude because it was the American deployment in conjunction with the Soviet Union which defeated the Nazis. Unfortunately, today we have a Biden administration which is arming the neo-Nazis in the Ukrainian defense and security forces. Quite a shift over the period of years that have passed. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the hot summer ahead, and I'm not talking about weather. In fact, the weather has been unseasonably cool here in Germany and in many other parts of the world, despite the ravings of the radical environmentalists who claim that we're about to boil the planet over. Now, I'm talking about a hot summer, meaning war, an expansion of the wars that are already underway, especially with NATO provocations planned. Let me just run through a couple of things that are coming up, especially given the failure of the plan the corporate oligarchs set in motion to weaken and destroy and isolate Russia and China. That's failing. It's not working. In fact, it's having the opposite effect of leading to organization development in support of a move away from the unipolar world order. So the danger is that if the current so-called offensive of the Ukrainians, backed fully by NATO and the US and the British and the Germans and others, if it fails, the question has been raised, does this mean NATO will directly get involved in the campaign against Russia in Ukraine? Well, here are some of the things to look for. The Air Defender 23 NATO exercises that are coming up June 12th and 13th. 10,000 participants from 25 nations, 250 aircraft to coordinate the campaign to defend the airspace of NATO, which could easily include provocations against Russia, as some NATO countries are right up on the border of Russia. Then there's the BALT-OPS, the Baltic Naval Operations of NATO 23. 19 NATO countries will be participating. Remember, Seymour Hersh identified BALT-OPS 22 as the time that the bombs were planted on the Nord Stream pipelines that were used to sabotage them. They used the cover of BALT-OPS 22 to do that. Now, then you have the NATO Summit in Vilnius, Lithuania on July 11th and July 12th. Every summit recently has led to an escalation against Russia, as well as an affirmation that there will be no negotiations. We can expect the same this time. The question is, will Ukraine be given special status, brought into NATO, or just as an auxiliary member? What we can expect is more weapons, air defense. Will they send fighter jets? And Zelensky has threatened not to attend unless he gets what he wants. So that's something to watch closely to see what is going to happen, especially since it's almost universally acknowledged, except in the Western media, that there's no way that this war can be won by Ukraine, no matter how many weapons are poured in by the West. Then I think we have to watch for false flags that can be used. And one event that just happened last night was an explosion that severely damaged a dam on the Dnipro River. The Kakhovka Dam was hit by an explosion. This is the dam that supplies water to Crimea and the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, which is occupied by Russian forces. The Ukrainians, of course, are blaming Russia for this. Well, why would Russia do something to threaten the water supply of Crimea? Again, we see the reality as opposed to the fantasy put forward by the Ukrainian services. Then we saw what happened at the Shangri-La dialogue that just took place in Asia, with the U.S. escalating rhetoric, talking about naval maneuvers in the Taiwan Strait. This was the extension of global NATO to the Pacific. And it's the muscle flexing by global NATO, which is putting the U.S. on a collision course with China. Now, on the positive side, you have the August 22nd to 24th BRICS Summit in South Africa. You can expect between now and then the City of London, the World Economic Forum, the World Bank, the IMF globalists to launch further economic warfare against not only the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, but the 30 or so other nations that are clamoring to join the BRICS. There can be more economic warfare. For example, the Argentine finance minister was just in Beijing, signed some agreements, and immediately the IMF came forward with much tougher demands for Argentina to implement austerity, which is leading to capital flight from Argentina. Now, keep in mind also there was a report of an attempted coup in Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan is a nation that's part of the Eurasian Economic Union, which recently held a summit to talk about coordination as part of the de-dollarization underway. Now, the BRICS nations and their allies are moving rapidly to create alternative institutions to the collapsing Western dollar institutions and against the sanctions policy and the austerity policies. Even Fox News had to admit that the BRICS, what they said is the BRICS now represent a serious alternative to the G7. Now, one final note, Deutsche Bank just put out a warning of a coming default wave in the United States due to corporate debt and the credit crunch. The problem they identified is the combined effect of high interest rates, which is increasing the borrowing costs, with the high leverage that already exists in these banks built upon, quote, stretched margins. In other words, they're borrowing extensively to that, and what I mean borrowing, insolvent firms are borrowing to cover debts to keep them on the books at face value, when in fact, if they had to sell their assets to get the money to pay the debt, they'd be bankrupt. So this is what the Deutsche Bank report was warning about. They project an 11.3% default rate on U.S. loans between now and the end of 2024. In 2007, 2008, it was 12%. So it's approaching the levels of 2007, 2008. There's also a report out that in Germany, 16% of German firms have already relocated outside the country, and 30% more are looking at their options. They're caught in a credit crunch squeeze, higher energy rates, high interest rates, and a declining overall economic outlook. So these are some of the turbulences that are heading our way. Now, also look at the signs of continuing rebellion against the rules-based order. Biden demanded that the Saudis pump more oil to lower the prices to help his re-election campaign. The Saudi response? They're going to cut production, which will raise the prices, and they're doing this in coordination with Russia and the other members of OPEC. In response to this, the traveling salesman of the rules-based order, Blinken, will be going to Saudi Arabia to discuss, quote, U.S.-Saudi strategic cooperation, unquote. This will probably be a tough sell for Blinken because the Saudis have already indicated they're moving aggressively towards an alliance with China, toward rapprochement with Iran, and settling the Yemen war, which the United States has been supporting the Saudis in a policy of genocide against Yemen. It would be excellent if that ended. What's Blinken going to do? Ask them to continue to provide weapons to kill people in Yemen? Also, on U.S. diplomacy, the defense secretary from Raytheon, Lloyd Austin, will be going to India. The U.S. is clearly worried that India is not gung-ho on global NATO or the Quad policy for the Indo-Pacific region. Obviously, he's going to demand they support global NATO and that they break their alliance with Russia. Now, in this context, the Schiller Institute event this Saturday, June 10th, is crucial. It's time for people to take responsibility for what government can't or won't do. We have to build a mobilization for a sane economic policy, a new strategic architecture, and an economic development architecture based on cooperation rather than war. So join us this Saturday. It will be at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The link is below in the description page. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Hello, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Support our independence to produce videos like these. Become a member of the LaRouche organization at thelarouche.org/member. By becoming a member for $25 or more, you'll get special access to the EIR Alert Daily Briefing and Weekly Magazine, which is what I read to stay on top of things.